Hello, and welcome to a Waking Moment podcast. I'm Danny Palacio. I'll be your host today, and I am joined by a delightful soul that I have had the pleasure of getting to know over the last few years, Tiffany Van Goey. And I'll let her introduce herself, but to let you know that this is a person, a woman that you can trust. I have learned and experienced her to be one of the great seekers in life. Her heart is full and big and generous and kind, and her desire is full of compassion. She is a seeker of understanding and then embodying that understanding and then sharing that with others. So I've invited her to have a conversation about the divine, sacred feminine. And so we will get into more of that. But first, I'll pass it over to you, Tiffany. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, my name is Tiffany Van Goey. I am a somatic practitioner. I just started a business as a somatic stylist because I've cut hair for the past 17 years. Primarily, I've worked with men in my career most. And yeah, you nailed it. I am a seeker, and I mostly work with people to help them feel grounded in their bodies and aware of their interoceptive experience, and with practices that are practical to be able to sort of turn down the fragility to the outside, raising the sensitivity to the inside so that there's more of a sense of who they are. And I think the world that we're in right now is really calling all of us to have a grip of that core of who we are, because that makes us much harder to manipulate and propaganda to when we really know who and what we are. And it allows us to work together in really synchronized, beautiful ways across all kinds of different divides. So
That's
let's
awesome
do
and
it.
lovely and super important. And
Yeah.
so, for those of you that have listened to my podcasts, you know that my devotion is to help you find your own inner truth and to discover how to live life courageously. And so, I think, Tiffany, your work, is such a beautiful combination and step in that pursuit. And so, another wonderful reason to have you here. Um,
Thank
so,
you.
so we're going to have this conversation. We're going to share from our own personal experiences. And I really hope that as you listen or as you watch this, you take a moment and have the experiences reflect on your own experiences. Allow your experiences to come forth as we share ours. Um, if I haven't said it yet, I'll say it right now. I don't believe in competition. I don't believe that one soul competes against another soul, or one woman competes against another woman, or one man, and all the various interesting ways that we connect and we partner with other people and even things. And our world and our society kind of gets off on competition in a
Yeah,
really
the
powerful way.
hierarchies.
Like, uh,
Mm.
are you better than someone else? Did you outscore someone? Well, what was your result? Well, my result was this. And in this realm of diving into your soul, understanding your truth, living your best life, the only thing that matters is you. The only thing that is real is your own inner truth and your sense of who you are. So, if the stories you hear inspire you, which is a great word, uh, great, go do something about it.
Yeah.
And if the
Yeah.
stories really make you go, I don't think so, sit with why. Why did you have that reaction?
Mm.
It's totally acceptable to have that reaction, but in this pursuit of inner truth and discovering
Mm.
it, you've got to start asking the questions. Why? What does this
Yeah.
mean? How come I felt that? Where did I feel that? Which
Oh, yeah.
Tiffany could talk a lot about.
Where actually something I wanted to share that's been helping me a lot, because of course a lot of the stuff that we're doing, that internal, like you said, asking yourself, why do I feel that way and where do I feel that? Hierarchies, right? Like there's some realms and places where maybe a hierarchy is useful, but within interpersonal relationships, it's so damaging. And so I started utilizing the idea of like musical notes, right? Because we need all the musical notes for the symphonies of life. And
Mhm.
even dissonant melodies are really powerful and important to break up stagnant energy. And so even the stuff that feels dissonant can be useful and important. And so like thinking, when I meet something or someone that's melody maybe doesn't harmonize with my melody, then there's not that better than, worse than, but there still is the recognition that feels truthful. If something feels dissonant here, what is it? And then the curiosity is much easier to access, to be like, wait, why did that feel weird? To your point, which is what,
Yeah.
and it makes it harder for us to access our own curiosity, to ask why, if we're in hierarchy or in better than, worse than, competition. Good.
No, it doesn't. And so we don't invite that in here. We invite in
Mm-mm.
curiosity. We invite
Yeah,
in
yeah,
acceptance. We invite in um, individual truth. And so
yeah.
we're going to dive into a topic that um, is big
Mm.
and is ancient. And there's a lot of opinions. Oh my goodness. There's so many opinions on this particular topic, and you'll hear a lot of them. You may not always hear it the way we're going to share it. Um, like I introduced it as the divine sacred feminine, right? And so, but let's just start with feminine, and then we'll get into
Mm.
the divine, and then we'll figure out what the sacred means. Because
Yeah.
we got to start, at a base. Well, we all know feminine and masculine. We
Mm.
think girl, boy. But in our world today, there are so many iterations of that spectrum. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm an all inclusive kind of person. I don't
Yep.
always use the right words, but my heart is always all inclusive. Everybody has the right to be exactly what they want to be and express themselves the way they want to express themselves.
Mm.
So if we just focus on feminine, I will say that feminine energy is not directly in a body that is female. Feminine
Mm-hmm.
energy is energy. And as you've heard me talk about energy in the past, energy is everything. We are energy, and we've manifested ourselves in this particular form.
Mm.
And so the feminine and the masculine are energies that are within us and all around us. Um, and and then I'll just do my quick thing, but then I want Tiffany to weigh in about what her perspective is, because you might need to hear it from her. So, feminine, there's feminine. So, then there's the divine feminine. And when we think about the divine feminine, we think about a much bigger, uh, universal energy of, like, often you'll hear the divine feminine as the divine mother, or Gaia, our
Mm.
earth. She is a feminine energy, but she has masculine energy in her as well, because she's constantly doing masculine energetic related things, which
Mm.
we'll talk very shortly about. We'll probably have to have a podcast about the divine masculine. Um,
Yes.
and then sacred. So sacred is something that is almost personal, individual. I can't deem or tell you that something is sacred if you don't feel it, if you don't recognize it that way. So when I think about sacred, I think about something that is awe inspiring, something that is so deeply um, huge that it's beyond my mental understanding, yet it
Mm.
humbles me and it opens my heart. And there's such goodness and yumminess and juiciness and just deliciousness in
Mm.
that. So when I put the divine, or the sacred divine feminine, together,
Mm.
I think of this immense energy that is eternal, that is always wanting us to know that we are unconditionally loved, that we have the power to create, we have the power to be, we can bring comfort and love. We can share comfort and love and peace and tranquility within ourselves, and then we can share it with everybody else. And this energy is ever present. It never goes away, and it's always available. So in our darkest moment, when we are like, I can't one more second. And we've all been
Mm.
in those moments. Call upon the divine sacred feminine to come in and kiss you up and hug you and love you and hold you until you are strong enough to get up and keep
Mm.
going.
Mm.
Um, so, Tiffany, share your personal perspective of the sacred divine feminine.
Mm. I think, yeah, we talked a little bit. We talked a lot before the show, and one of the things that I notice about, we talked about like soulmates and divine union and all that, and how really it feels to me like the soulmate contract, that's the one we care about the most. It's the most important, is that contract between your spirit and your body, which is why all the power is in the present moment, right? Um, and how the masculine kind of holds a more physical realm, the hustle grind, pushing something, pulling something, whereas the feminine to me feels like that magnetism, sort of shifting your energy to be on a frequency to pull things towards you, to magnetize them towards you. So the divine sacred feminine to me feels like a force that's much more, it's the force that man is scared of because it does function in a realm that's not necessarily understood by the scientific mind, because the mind is, the ego, the mind, these are the tools that we use in our human lives. And so I think the feminine is this force that's beyond, I think, what we can see. And I think that's why it feels so scary to some people. But it is this really powerful force that holds us in the ways that we, especially in those moments where we don't feel like we're held or protected. It's that force that is there for us to call on. So I envision it more like that, like a powerful magnetic force.
Love that.
Yeah, where, a life source, etc.
Cool. Well, as you all know, I love definitions, and I found out that Tiffany does too. And
Yeah.
so I am going to read you what the lovely Google has said today about the meaning of the divine feminine. And we read this before we started recording, and we both agreed that it was a really good summary with some concrete examples. So here we go. The divine feminine is the feminine aspect of the divine power that connects and binds the earth. She is the goddess energy that exists within all of us. And many ancient cultures had a divine feminine concept. The Egyptians had Isis, the Greeks had Aphrodite, and the Hindus had Shakti. And so I appreciate this definition because it summarizes everything Tiffany and I just shared, what we feel is true about the divine feminine in a really succinct way. And so as you hear that definition, ask yourself where that is within you. How have you felt that? How have you experienced that energy that exists, that is so divine and feminine in perspective? And I guess for contrast's sake, let's talk a little bit about the divine masculine. Although this call is not focused on that, the divine masculine, the sacred divine masculine, is an energy that exists within all of us. So it's equal. And its energy is very doing, very action oriented, very, so a woman, when you birth a child or you birth an idea, that nurturing, that bringing it to fruition, to manifestation, is feminine, but the actual push out is very masculine. So you need both. You need to feel safe to be able to call on both, to feel both in your body. So in spiritual traditions, this is often seen as Kundalini energy, where there's two serpent spiraling energies, one's masculine, one's feminine, and it brings you into what they say is an ecstatic state of like sacred sexuality and your own sacred energy of that life force, because we have it, right? We wouldn't be here if we didn't have it. Some of us are shut down to it, some of us don't want to admit it, but we have it. And what else? The divine masculine, in our American version of an example, a lot of times is like Father God and Mother God, right? Father God and maybe Mother Mary, or Kuan Yin or Isis, and some archetype that exudes the divine feminine in her roundness and in her comfort and in her love and in her creativity. And the
Mm-hmm.
masculine is there to support, nurture, witness, protect, and push out, help amplify that
Mm-hmm.
energy. And so we need that. We need both of those energies. And I decided to do divine feminine first because she's the most misunderstood aspect
Yeah.
of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she is the thing that binds us and connects us to the greatest possibility. So, anything you want to add on the divine masculine
Yeah.
and kind of how they
I mean,
flow?
I just as it goes in daily life, I get this example in my mind of how when we're creating things in our lives, and for me, I've been inundated through my life with the hustle grind culture, a lot of the heavy on the masculine side of making things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and I got very little understanding of how the feminine energies play a role. As vital as that to make any of that real. And so I missed the whole part about magnetizing, about alignment, getting aligned in my body, which is why I do this. I am a somatic practitioner now, and I help put those together for people. I had to do it for myself first and continue to do that for myself. And I feel like the divine feminine, it is just this very powerful, um, unseen force, that creative, like that sexual creative energy that we have. Um, like the two most powerful energies I feel like we've been divorced from that help us create things is our imagination and our sexual energy, which is our creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
To me, like our imagination's been infantilized, like that's for kids. Like so you're an adult, like put that away, kind of that's how I feel like I was sort of pushed away from or divorced from that part of my feminine energy. And then too, like your sexual energy, there's a lot of shame and other things like surrounding that for most of us, for a lot of us. And so those two energies to me, between the imagination and that sexual energy, like those feel like very feminine aspects of creation that are so vital to bring together to create anything of value, especially at a time like this where the world is calling for a very new way of being, thinking, new templates of relationship, new templates of community, things like this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to me, the divine feminine is this really vital counterpart to the doing, the hustle, the grind that we're getting taught all the time and inundated with as like how to make stuff happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then the feminine to me is like the whole freaking creative force behind how we even come up with or conceptualize that or dream of or let things show up for us to then and then bring up that energy to then make, like you're saying, the creation, the birthing, and then that final step of then, okay, now it's in the physical realm and the masculine energy helps us in that part
Mm-hmm.
of the process. So yeah, to me, it signifies the most foundationally important part of any creative process that we're trying to get along in life and make new things together, have access to and need to have greater understanding of and access to make the kind of world we actually want to be living in together now.
Yeah.
That's kind of it
I
for
like
me
that.
there.
I think that's such a great way to perceive it and see it and experience it. Um,
Mm.
I was, as you were sharing it, dawned on me that maybe we could give an example to
Yeah.
help people kind of bring this down into their bodies and into their, well, even in their minds, just ability to start to comprehend how it is actually showing up and how the divine feminine is working in their life. So I'll
Yes.
share my example,
Please.
and that'll give you a minute to think of one yourself, because of course this is never planned. Um,
No.
but as you were sharing, I started to become very aware that I am in this exact experience of honoring the divine feminine and
Mm.
helping and asking for support and help to feel safe and to feel nurtured, and then figuring out how to actually get it out there, which is this podcast. So, and I've shared the story of how I named how the name came and all of that, but
Mm.
a different aspect of this is I worked in corporate America. I was a communications manager, and I worked in one of the largest corporations on the planet, right? And so huge, huge, huge organizations. And you had to fight to be seen. You had to want to hustle. You had to want to show up. You had to do projects to get noticed. And I think everybody experiences that at some place in their life where they're like, if I don't show up, if I don't do this, if I don't act like this, if I don't follow through, if I don't take on bigger projects and say yes, yes, yes to more and more and more, I'm going to be left behind. I'm going to not be seen. I'm going to not be valued. No one's going to know who I am. And somehow that becomes important along the journey, that it becomes even more important that everybody else gets you and you don't even know who you are. And I've lived that experience for years. I've lived that experience, even though I've always been spiritual and always had this other sense. The quote unquote rat race that you mentioned is that, and it's seductive. It's like it pulls you in. So there's a magnetism around that too, and which I think is not divine feminine, but I do think it's more of the mind, the ego, and our society, and then the corporate culture that you're in. So as I've shared, I've recently separated from Intel. I was laid off. Oops. I guess you guys get to know where I worked.
They didn't hear that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Intel was wonderful, and I'll go into all that later. But so the example. So I've been pulled and I've been pushed, and I've focused more on producing and externally, and bringing my will to manifestation, bringing my whatever to the table in a very secular way, because that's what corporate America jobs tend to. They don't want to know about the other aspect that is softer and feminine. They want that masculine to show up to get shit done. And so I was good at it. I was actually excellent at it. And it had a cost. So over the course of my life, I've come in and out of corporate America. But this most recent experience, I was officially separated on June 15th. And so it's been a little bit over a month. But I had about a 7-week period before where I was no longer in a job, but I was still an employee, which gave me time to look for a job or find some stability and all of that. But what I chose, because the divine feminine inspired me and almost like told me, is that recuperate, allow your dreams to come, allow spaciousness to ponder ideas and to discover what actually excites you and brings passion to your life. And I had lots of ideas. I've been working on a book for like 4 years. And I thought, I'll write the book. No, that wasn't it. I'll do more healing sessions. I'll reach out to clients and let them know that I'm available. And that was a no. It was a yes, but not now. So it was a no for now. And then the more I unraveled, the more I became aware of the fact that I was very raw. I wanted balance in my life, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I ended up really working with the divine feminine energy that is within me, that part of me that loves me, that knows me, that accepts me, that can nourish and nurture me. And I had to become, not only in my energy and in my thoughts, but I had to become body partnered. I had to partner with my body because she knows the truth. She knows what is right and good for me. And I don't listen a lot of the time. And so I have been, it's been a longer journey than the last 7 months or 7 weeks, but I'm finally, I will use the word surrender. I have finally surrendered to the fact that I am in the greatest partnership of my life, and it is with my body. And I have never been happier. And in that state, I realized that it's time to be seen. It's time to be heard. And how can I do that? I thought it was writing a book. I thought it was writing a blog. But the Divine Mother was like, show yourself, like get on something and show yourself. And I'm like, oh, that's a little scary, because you don't ever know, right? You don't ever know how you're going to be received. And it's so like, ugh. But I felt her nudging me. I felt her comforting me. And I also felt the divine masculine saying, we got this. You know how to execute. You know how to get shit done. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I guess I do.
Yeah.
And my brain was like, we are so smart. Like, you just ask the question, you're going to find the answer. And so that's my life example. And then this
Yeah.
beautiful podcast and the sharing on social media, which I was so resistant to. I just opened up a TikTok account. I don't even know where to start, but I hope that you can see in my journey that we can become way out of balance. We can move into the masculine and live in the masculine for a very long time. And women tend to do this a lot because our society says we have to compete with the boys, the men,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And, there's a whole thing about that. And
Mm.
so I think women in general have a little bit more to heal, more to let go of than maybe men. But the masculine, the men, the ones that are so predominantly masculine, they have
Mm.
the same journey when it comes to the divine feminine.
Yes.
Um, because they've been told, don't you cry, don't be emotional, you're a boy,
Yeah. Like
whatever that
anger is
means,
the only acceptable emotion. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Hmm.
And know it all, and bully,
Hmm.
and I mean there's just so many horrible things that have been
Yeah.
rooted in some really true experiences.
Yeah.
um so we all, whether you're working on your divine feminine or you're working on your divine masculine, there's a
Mm.
journey, right?
Yeah. I
And
agree.
mine
That actually,
is now here, right? Like here I am with Tiffany and we're talking about this, and
we're doing it.
it made me nervous. I'm going to be honest. This topic makes me nervous because I have soul experiences where when we talked about the power of the divine feminine, we were murdered, and it wasn't accepted. But we don't live
Mm.
in that kind of society. Not like it once was, right?
No.
We can still be put down. We can still
Yeah.
be fearful, but ultimately,
Our lives are not in jeopardy the way they would have been then, which our
exactly.
souls remember. I think it's interesting what you said about, I also feel this a similar type of thing with being seen online. I've only ever been comfortable with being seen online in a superficial way, which makes it harder too, because I have an online presence over the years, but it's one that's very different from what my real presence is, especially now that I'm starting to do the work I'm doing and share, like I'm sharing it out actually now, where I was
Mhm.
not before. And interestingly, what you were saying, I have these two quick examples of things that I saw in people I love and in myself. Had a partner at one time who came from a very masculine background as far as like his ideas about how to make things happen for himself. And he had this lifelong goal that was just all he wanted to do with his life. And, even in partnership, it was just so difficult to watch him struggle in the ways that he did, because for him, the concept of surrender, so the feminine aspect coming in to allow to meet the masculine parts he had mastered,
Mhm.
um, it's like he could never actually allow for that. There was too much fear. There was too many stories in his mind around, what surrender actually means, because people think surrendering is this like really passive act, and it just isn't. The word itself is sort of misleading, um, because to surrender to something has a lot more to do with being present with your pain.
Yeah.
And to me, that was kind of like the doorway for me to surrender more to the feminine aspect of like, what is in my imagination, what visions do want to come to me, or dreams want to show up to me. And I experienced also losing a job at the beginning of this year, and with working for someone who's also a woman, just very, very caught up in the masculine of like competition and zero sum game. And so there was an issue with documenting my work as a hairstylist, which in the salon realm is very unusual. In a salon, if I'm a salon owner, I want all of you to have Instagrams documenting your work because that's free marketing for me. And this
Yeah.
person just simply didn't have that same perspective. You know, there's a lot of fear accompanying and a lot of gripping tight to things and a lot of this kind of like, you know, got to push, it's got to be this way, a lot of control. And so I got kind of cornered in this way where I didn't want to sign certain paperwork and I felt like I have to surrender. I can't say yes to this. And so when I finally became separated from that job and had to go out on my own and decide what I was going to do, which I then, you know, became I coined somatic stylist and I incorporate my somatic practitioner work in with my haircuts now. I let myself just be with my fear, be with the emotions that came up, and in being able to surrender to that and not try to resist or fight it, you know, because that resistance against feeling something, or even the resistance of pushing something faster than it's supposed to be going, right? Those are two different examples of resistance. In the somatic realm, to resist in those ways, you're then focusing so much on this thing that you either don't want or you want to move faster, that all of the capacity you have to take in your reality, opportunities that might be available, something nice that might also be happening alongside this difficult thing. We no longer then have the capacity to take that in. We no longer have the capacity to receive the visions and the creative influences from the feminine. And so I had a real masterclass experience in my personal, you know, if my life is my curriculum, you know, I had my little beginning of my PhD moment with this where I really had to, because it was so high stakes, be with my pain, be with my fear. And I can see now looking back at like the creative ideas that came and then the opportunities that came for me to find a place to rent, to start my business. The way all that came in, you can never repeat it. I could never repeat how that happened. But because I made myself available in that surrender to feel what was there, I was able to take a phone call I would have otherwise never taken if I were caught up in the like, I gotta push, I gotta, and that to me, that fascinates me to this day that like, wow, I would have missed certain opportunities to make this next step happen and to receive these feminine aspects to come in to help me marry together with my efforts to make this new thing. So that's kind of what I think of as like personal examples.
I love that example because for me, it has to do with spaciousness and your willingness, right?
Yes.
So surrender is a hard word because we do feel like we're going to lose something and we're letting something go. But it's not. It's opening up to the possibility that you may not have all the information and that you might not have in this time what you need in the sense of something coming, right?
Yeah.
But spaciousness and willingness is another way for me to kind of say, oh, am I willing to let go of what I think I know? And am I open to receiving that spaciousness to be able to see different possibilities? And not only that, if you have any faith or any sense of spiritual or energetic within you, which we all do, by the way, whether you activate them or use them or not, you allow then a creative force to come in and produce and manifest on your behalf, right? That's how I see it, right? Like,
Yes.
like you said, you couldn't, the way that you got your space couldn't be replicated. It couldn't happen
No,
unless it was just kind of divinely orchestrated for it to
it
occur
was totally.
because of your own awareness and your surrender and your trust in the divine feminine, trust in the creative process, trust that there's something bigger and better for you that you can't even imagine. Like that's the like people always say, Danny, why are you so positive? It's not necessarily positivity. It's just for me, these are universal laws. If we get out of the way and we ask for what we need from a place of willingness and love and higher, like the highest alignment for not only myself but for everyone connected to me and for everyone that's
Yeah.
ever going to be, right?
Yes.
Then it's not so much about me. And so it's easier for me to just say, okay, I'll let go. I mean, and if you haven't listened to the podcast on how I got this name, it's exactly the same type of story. So it's
Yes.
I didn't know what the name of this podcast was going to be. I had a list of a good 50 good names that would have been great in marketing, would have been awesome in differentiation, and I could have done a blah 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 blah. I would have had a great marketing plan, an awesome logo, and and then I trust and I let go and I surrendered, and a waking moment came, just came, and then all the other things that needed to come with it were all available, and that's the beauty. So
Just so happen to have the name available for the website and the thing, and like where it's like all those are taken. How is that available? It's amazing. Yeah,
exactly,
I thought all the
exactly.
websites were taken.
Yes. And it cost $1.
Yeah, that was the other one. I was like, what? It
Yeah,
was only a
a
price. I had to
dollar.
pay. I had to pay $9 for mine.
Right? I mean, URLs are pretty cheap nowadays, but I just thought it
Yeah,
was hilarious, like
that's really
a
funny.
dollar. So
Amazing.
so those are some really good examples of the divine feminine. I
Mm.
guess um to help those
Oh,
that don't know
mm,
about what is the divine feminine, I think it is nice to use archetypes. I think it
mm,
is nice to be able to read stories, to look in cultures that have documented their perspective of the divine feminine. There are a lot of visual that like scream out, this is divine feminine.
mhm.
The spiral, and the goddess shape, um, and even a lot of it can be like, well, they're all women, because that's the archetype, right? So if we looked at the example that Google description said, Isis,
Mm,
Mother Isis was known as, the great mother. She is the one that created everything, right? So
mm.
she birthed humanity. She was, a high priestess in temples of sacred ritual and ceremony. And she was onto her own a sovereign self. And she taught that to all the beings that were part of her experience, that sovereignty is one of our greatest gifts that we don't own. And so part of the divine feminine can be very soft, like we've been talking about, can be very sweet, can be very nurturing, can be very loving.
Mm.
But there's also the divine feminine that is going to kick your ass. I mean, she doesn't put up
Wrathful
with
love, baby.
anything. She loves you
Mhm.
so much, she's going to like smack you and say, get going.
Yeah.
And people look at that, the darker side. Um, I don't think of it as dark. I think of it as empowered. I think of it
Mm,
as bold. I think of it
mm,
as loud. Um, and this divine feminine energy that has such strength and wisdom to be able to step forth and make a proclamation and command that, you know, this be done,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like the
Yes.
power of that, that's a
Yes.
whole nother part of the divine feminine that we don't often talk about because it can get scary for some people.
Yeah.
So what are your
I
thoughts
think
on that?
I think it points to that the ultimate leadership that humanity needs does come from the divine feminine, actually, that guidance. That's the
Right.
part that's crazy to me, where I'm like, we live in this society that leans into this patriarchal lens of how men are in charge because of all these made up reasons. And really, it's the divine feminine that is the oracle, that is the guide that sees into the dark that the masculine isn't, that's not their realm.
No, and
And
then we
so
wouldn't call them oracles, we would call them prophets.
prophets, yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
because there's
And
different
actually,
words for masculine and feminine, kind of,
yeah, what's
speakers of
that?
truth, right? Philosophers, they tend to be
Yeah.
masculine, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Prophets
Yeah.
tend to be
The
masculine, but
Stoics.
oracles and goddesses and
Mm.
teachers, like,
Yes.
they tend to be feminine. And, then
Yeah.
of course we got all the other names, witches, um, and,
But
you
there's
know,
priestess and sorceress and all
I
that. But
like witch. You can call me a witch. I'm okay with that.
yeah, well,
Like,
yeah, you know.
It's
You know,
just,
I'm a
it's
Scorpio
just one
moon.
of those
That's like
things
my,
that it's a word that we should reclaim. It's not a
yeah,
negative word, and it's
no,
been distorted through history. And
so much.
when you look at the basis of it for just one small second, and then I'll
Yeah.
get off my my witch thing, but if you look at it for one small second, it's really a person, because there were female witches and then there were
Mm-hmm.
male, which we would call wizards.
Mm-hmm.
But they were witches too, right?
Or
All,
warlocks, or
or warlock. That's it. That's the word. Wizards too, but warlock is the one
yeah.
I was thinking. So thank you for
Oh
that.
yeah, I pulled that out of your
Yeah, you
brain.
did. You're good at
Yeah.
that. So my point on that is these witches or warlocks, they had a deep and profound love and respect for the earth and all that
Mm-hmm.
the earth produced. And they understood the alchemy of a seed growing into a plant that produces a flower that makes it into an oil that is then used
Mm-hmm.
to bless or heal someone. They
Mm-hmm.
understood the life cycle of most everything and how it beautifully interacted with one another. So they did anticipate, they did have unseen knowledge because of
Yeah.
their observation and their deep devotion. And
Yes.
so that's why I don't mind being called a witch, because I think we need a little of that in this world. We need a little
Yeah.
bit more of people observing and understanding and using that alchemy for good, right? To
Yes.
bring
Yeah.
humanity back into a place of balance and equality and sovereignty. If we're all free, we're all free.
Yes.
If there's
Yeah.
one person that's not free, we're not
We're
free.
all free. No,
So
that's like what
owning
they
that
don't
in
get.
time, I think
There's
is important.
something, there's something I want to read to you that it's very short.
Go
It's
ahead.
something that I channeled actually in like April of maybe like 2 years ago. And this to me encapsulates the difference between like how the divine feminine works in life and destruction, and where like the masculine thinks it knows and then tries to mimic it. And so this was, man sees that nature is severe. The seed casing implodes to give way to life after all. But he mimics what he sees, and because he does not know the intention behind nature's severity, he creates war and destruction instead of new life. And so to me, that encapsulates like the wisdom and the divine understanding in the feminine's movement through life and death.
Mm-hmm.
That when man, the ego, the mind tries to mimic it but doesn't understand the essence of what creation is, it it creates a distortion instead of new life. So
Yeah.
that's something else I've noticed as well about the distortions in the masculine and the feminine, and how when people try to mimic what they see instead of understanding the essence of it, how
Yeah.
that goes.
Well, because mimicking isn't authentic,
No.
right? So when you mimic something or someone,
Uh-huh.
you do not believe within yourself that you have the capacity and the capability of actually being it. So you
No.
mimic it. And,
It feels mind driven. Yeah.
it's mind driven, yes. And there's probably a goal in mind of some
Sure.
reason why you feel like you need to mimic it versus taking the time to sit with it, learn from it, embody it, and then have it your own authentic expression, right?
Yeah.
So and oh man, if you go back in history, you will find that there was matriarchal societies and patriarchal societies. And if you look at it long enough into all of creation time, you'll learn
Mhm.
that it was always it was always agreed upon that when one reign ended, the other one would come back in. So it
Mhm.
was masculine and feminine taking turns being stewards of this beautiful planet that we live on.
Yeah.
And there is a lot said in our world today that the patriarchy is falling and that the matriarchy is returning, and that
Mm.
we need to wake up to our own inner divine feminine and masculine selves so that we can
Mhm.
be in a neutral balanced state to be able to call upon both of those energies because they're
Mm.
necessary, right? And we
Right.
have them. So let's use them to our greatest good.
Yeah.
And I just think personally, I have no proof of this, but personally, my own wisdom says we're not moving into a matriarchal. We're not coming out of patriarchy to go into matriarchy. Like
Mhm.
that cycle is over.
I
And
feel that
so,
too.
yeah. So, what are we
I
going
feel like,
into? We're
yeah.
going into hopefully what a lot of people call divine union, where the
Yeah.
masculine and the feminine can be equals and that they
Yeah.
can stand in front of each other and they can be in awe of each other and that they can
Yeah.
come together, create together, and become more than they thought they could be. And then
Yeah.
they're still sovereign selves. They never lose their sovereignty. And
Yes.
our world structure isn't set up that way. So, all this, I'll just call it chaos for lack of a better term, but that we're all experiencing.
Mm.
It's an election year. There's a lot of stuff going on. I was listening to a post on Instagram. Um, who is an astrologer? I'm trying to remember his name. He's really wonderful. He's new to me. Um, is it Chasing Chiron?
Oh,
Anyway,
maybe. I think I follow him. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he's really quite good. I'll
Yeah.
put his symbol up so that if you're curious about learning more about him. The reason I bring him up um, is because he's a very good example of being intelligent and being intuitive and
Mm.
holding a place of peace and balance. And you don't
Mm.
see that always in men. As it's not as common. It's not that it doesn't exist because I think men can do that in a beautiful way
It
and
totally exists. It's just, you're right. I don't think it's as common either. I
it's
certainly
not as
don't see it
common.
as often.
This young man, I think he's a good example of what that could look like. And
Mhm.
we women, we have our own work to do. There is still
Yes.
a
Oh, yes.
cultural society that says I'm better than you, I'm prettier than you, I'm smarter than you, I'm more successful than you can't have what I have, and we compete and
Mhm.
we belittle our
Mhm.
own inner goddess self and all the goddesses that are all around us, the divine
Yeah.
feminine women that is us, and we still aren't fully embracing, encouraging, standing up for,
Yeah.
loving, caring openly, right?
Yeah.
And that's
We're
got to
stuck in that old
change.
paradigm. Yeah.
So old paradigm, like you get to be who you are and your gifts are
Mm.
amazing. One of the things that tipped the scale for me on this journey is that, and I had heard it for so many years, but one of it was all the souls that have been waiting for me to say what I'm saying are waiting for me to say what I'm saying. No one else
Yeah.
can say what I'm saying to those souls that are uniquely waiting for me.
Yes.
And that's true for every single one of you.
Yeah.
Whatever your gift is, whatever your
Yeah.
purpose is, whatever it is you wish you had done and didn't do, do it. Because there's a whole group of people waiting just for you and won't
Mhm.
get what they've been waiting for if you don't give it.
Yeah. I feel that. That's what I'm feeling, the sort of weight of that's motivating me more to share,
Yeah.
because it is these paradigms of like the power over, power under, the hierarchical, those are getting cleared out
Mhm.
necessarily. And what's coming in its place is, like you said, much more of that back and forth, that sort of that balanced back and forth or teamwork, because they do go together in this beautiful way. And we just haven't, I don't feel like we've seen or experienced that in any kind of like cultural, social way in this, our current understanding or iterations of it.
Yeah. Well,
And I
and the
think we're
ones
trying
that
to.
have been more enlightened that actually are doing it, sharing it, speaking it, um,
Mhm.
it's getting so quickly distorted, right?
Yeah, that
You know,
too.
they're
And
the
that's why
favorite.
I feel like,
Go ahead.
that's why I feel like the getting really grounded in your body and in that divine union within yourself is the power of now, right? Like that book by Eckhart Tolle, like the power we have is in the now, because that union between your spirit and your body, the feminine and the masculine, we need to be able to be in that more consistently throughout the day to day, and the choices we're making and the interactions we're having, like having more experience getting back into that divine union when we feel ourselves drifting away from it, because that's the only way, that is the place from which we can do a new paradigm together that is not the power over power under. Because I can see everybody to their stations is like what this time feels like. And what you said about you have a unique, the competition between women that you just mentioned, all of us need to be able to bring forward our light, because like you said, there's people waiting to see that, to experience that. So the competition part of it is part of that sort of, again, a distorted word, the agenda of whatever, to
Oh yeah,
not
I call it a
embody that.
program. I
A
feel like
program,
there's
yeah.
some weird dark force energy program that
Mm-hmm.
infiltrated all of us. And now we're like full of these programs. And it's funny because I worked in
Yeah.
high tech forever. So I personally get that analogy of like, oh, I've downloaded all these programs and they're
Yes.
running crazy wild, but
Yeah.
I don't need them anymore. They're out of date.
They're
They,
not helpful. Yeah.
and, so like purge,
Mm. Yeah.
delete, and
Yeah.
reboot yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels very necessary. Yeah. And so leaning into that feminine to me feels like part of the way a lot of us are going to get to do that
Yeah.
surrender. Being home in our bodies enough to get the messages about how to do that, and what that looks like for you specifically, and what that feels like for you specifically.
Yeah.
Feels
You
like,
know, for some guidance for people that are going to try, right? They're going to listen to this
mm,
podcast and they're going to wonder, you know, how do I even start, right?
mm,
And there's 1,000 doorways to open, but you only need to find one that works for you. When it
mm,
comes to the feminine, one, she already loves you and she is with you. You don't have to do anything. She's already part of you and she's all around everywhere. So if you want to experience the divine feminine more and you're more intellectual, you need to read, you need to understand, go look for those archetypes. Every culture has a list of archetypes, gods and goddesses, right?
mm,
If you are a Christian and you believe in Jesus, well, then look at that story. There's the father and there's the son of the father. And yet he was born and birthed through a human woman. And she's, the divine Holy Mary Mother, right? And then
mm,
we just celebrated Mary Magdalene's Day, July 22nd. And, it's a lot for the Catholic Church to have a feast day for a woman. And
mm,
she is one of them. And so there are a lot. I mean, I remember when I was young and we studied the Bible, and I always loved the book of Ruth. Not sure exactly why, other than I found her to be very authentic and she struggled and yet she survived. And so there are women in any wherever you find yourself in your spirituality, in your faith, in your religion, in your
mm.
life, there's
Yeah.
always something. And if you're an atheist and you don't believe in any of that, then I want
Mm,
to offer you to look at nature. I want you to stare at a rose. And if you're not transformed by its smell, by
mm,
its beauty, by its soft petals, by the way that it glistens in the sun, by the color that you chose, whatever color rose you chose. And
mm,
if roses aren't your thing, if you're like some real like woodsy man's guy, then go climb a tree, right? And because the divine mother, the divine feminine, is
mm.
present, right?
Yeah.
She's there. And
Yes.
the tree is
Animates all of us.
offering us beautiful oxygen. And that's
Mm-hmm.
a very caring, nurturing thing. I mean, we have to have it to live. So
Yes.
it doesn't have to be, some may call it woo woo, some may call it ultra spiritual, some may,
Sure.
all of that. It doesn't have to be that. It can be very simple. And
Mm-hmm.
so, Tiffany, I would love to ask, very spontaneous, put you on the spot, but
Sure.
I'd love to ask you to like help someone feel into their body what the divine feminine, like, where do you go in your
Mm.
body to find
Yes.
her? to feel her, to hear her.
Mm-hmm. For anybody of any gender to feel the divine feminine in your own body, I would say to close your eyes and take a deep breath through your nose, out through your mouth, and just be present with and bring your attention through like your conscious awareness, right? Like if I close my eyes and I bring my conscious awareness to what the micro muscles behind my eyes feel like, my tongue, my jaw muscles, and you just kind of go and focus on different parts of your body. You can start at the top of your head if you want to systematically go through. This is what I do with my somatic clients in my chair when I'm doing the haircuts as well. By connecting in and just feeling the aliveness in your chest, in your palm of your hand. I mean, that experience in and of itself, I think would be a really good starting place. It's so simple. If you think too hard, you will miss it. It really is experiential. It's not a mental concept to grasp. It is just as simple as closing your eyes and bringing your conscious awareness to some part of your body that you can like feel. That to me is the life force that animates your body and your being. It's the life force that animates all living things.
Yeah.
And that to me is like where it can be found.
And what
And
I'll
how it
encourage
can be
everyone else
felt.
to do is trust whatever you get.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going
Which
to
can
look
be
for
hard for
whatever,
people.
right? Trust the
Yeah.
very first thing. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be hard.
Yes.
If
Yes.
your heart starts to beat faster, or your hand starts to get hot, or
Just note that. Don't make up a
just
story about it
accept
yet,
that that's
even.
it,
Yeah.
and go
Yes.
with it. See where it takes
Yeah.
you.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Well, we've
I think
covered
we
a
did
lot of
it.
ground. Any
Yeah.
any thank you for sharing that, by the way. I appreciate that. And
I was
any
going to
final
say
thoughts for you?
one prescriptive one of like a book you could read that I'm only just now reading. I have not finished this book yet, but the Sophia Code is a really good book about the divine feminine. Yeah.
Yes, the Sophia Codes. It's really great on an audiobook too.
Yes.
And so if you want to read it and or listen to it, I second that recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
I think
And
the
for
other
people
one,
who don't, oh,
but no,
I
go
was gonna say
ahead.
for people who don't believe in the woo-woo stuff, that are still curious, I think for me, when I first read books like that, like the Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, like a lot of channeled texts, even if you are somebody who's like, I can't get over how I think maybe this person's just making it up, it doesn't matter. Just take in the information and match it against how it feels in your body to receive it. And like, if it doesn't resonate, don't worry about it. But if something does, that's the point. That's what we're looking for.
Yes. Yeah, trust those nudges, trust that feeling within yourself, wherever
Your
it
own
is,
authority.
however small or big it is. Because
Yeah.
what happens is you build trust with your body when
Mm-hmm.
you honor that you just got that signal, and then and you don't have to know what it means. You don't have to do anything with
Mm-mm.
it. You just have to acknowledge that you
Just take the
felt it,
inventory.
right?
Yeah.
And you do that over and over again. Before you know it, you're starting to learn the language of your body, which is the
Yes.
language of your soul in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So they work together. Um, I love that book recommendation. I think for me, it would be Jesse Ayani's book, The Lineage of the Codes of Light. And I'll put both of these books in the summary if you want to link. Hey, it's Danny, and you may have noticed a very short, abrupt end to the episode with Tiffany and I. And I just wanted to let you know that my internet went out. And so I'm going to do the wrap up. And Tiffany is totally 100% okay with me doing it by myself. So here we go. I hope you enjoyed the exploration of the divine feminine. We covered a lot of different perspectives and different ways to connect. But the one thing I want to leave you with is that we are energy, souls that are incarnated into human beings. And as a birthright, as a known fact, the divine feminine is within us. That energy, that spirit, that nurturing, caring, loving aspect is within all of us. It is not gender specific. It is because we are energy. And as we talked a little bit about, there's also the divine masculine, which I hope to go into more detail on a different podcast episode. So please take time to explore, to sense into where the divine feminine is within you. Where is she calling your awareness? And trust the answers and learn to trust your body's guidance. And I'm so grateful that you joined Tiffany and I today. And we send you many, many blessings. And we thank you from all of our heart to all of your hearts for being inquisitive, for wondering, and for supporting the podcast of A Waking Moment. Wishing you all the very best, and please feel free to check out resources below in the summary notes, as well as various things that we've talked about. There are a few book recommendations and a few links to other people that we mentioned in this podcast. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.